Hey everybody, welcome to another video. Today I'm going to talk about a book that I don't own yet. I've got it in my wish list on Amazon and in thrift books. It's about the same price on both. They've got a discount. The book's called American Comics Chronicles, and there's different books for different decades. Specifically, the one I'm looking at is the 80s, obviously. We're going to go through that one. And even though I don't own the book yet, I can't. It's like $38 on sale. Normally it's like 45 or 50. It's a little pricey for me right now, so I'm gonna have to wait to actually get the full book. However, the nice convenient thing is online. They offer a preview of it. It's not the full book. It's a it's a PDF, and it's got like pretty much it's got just some of the highlights from each chapter. It doesn't have the entire book in there. So we'll go through that. There's some, I'll show you what's in it, which I find cool, and they do seem to have most of those intact in the preview, so we can check that out. Plus, it'll talk about the chapters by year, meaning chapter 1, I mean, I think there's an introduction, but then chapter 1 would be 1980. So there's 10 chapters in the book, essentially, after the introduction. I don't know if there's a conclusion or what. But the book's laid out really nice, and it's funny because I was reading the preview and I was reading some of the stuff in it, and it's like, man, this is spot on to what I've been saying, and you guys will see that there's a lot of things I've been talking about over a lot of my videos that kind of correspond and correlate with this. So the good thing is my information that I've been giving you is pretty accurate to my recollection. Like I said, I don't research a lot of my own stuff. I'm going off the cuff of what I remember, so my years can be fuzzy. Names I might not remember exactly, titles, numbers, stuff like that. But by and large, it's pretty spot on. And of course, we'll go through 84 and is a chapter in the book, and again, we'll get to that point. So let's switch over to it. And we'll check it out here. There are other books. I think there's a 70s, there's a 90s, and there may be a 2000s. I'm not sure. I'd like to see them all. I haven't looked through only looked through the preview of the first book. Like I said, at like almost $50. Even on sale, $40 plus plus tax. It's kind of pricey to buy them all. I really want to. I'm really interested in the 80s, obviously, because that's when I began collecting comic books, and of course I started to collect comic books pretty avidly in 1984. So again, 40 years ago to this year, and I want to see, there's little things here and there, and they've got time. Like I said, I'll show you the timelines in the book. That's what I want to look at, is the timelines, and they give other things in other things that were relative in just that time period that coexisted at the same time things were happening, meaning like they talk about Reagan being elected. They talk about Michael Jackson's Thriller album. I mean, there's things that they kind of put in the timeline I think is pretty cool. So let's check that out. Let's check the whole preview. Remember, this is not the full book. I don't know. I don't know if they offer the full book as a PDF. I didn't see it. I just saw the preview. So we're going to go on that one alone. Again, I encourage you. This is a great book so far from what I've seen. I definitely want it. I'd encourage you to go out and help support this book and go out and buy it if you got the money, and you're really interested in this stuff. I mean, just doing a deep read on this would just be fascinating, because just the preview alone just got me hooked. Like I said, I can't gush enough more about it. I have my issues with a few things. I mean, obviously I'll nitpick some of the things that have problems with it. More of it that really has to do with the information they perceive. I assume they're pretty correct, and they cite everything. I assume that they do focus on a few things. I think they kind of hyper-focus on, and they kind of ignore a couple of small details. That's a little nitpick. But most of my nitpicks are like the covers. I'm not a huge fan of it. Now, let me pull it up so you know what I'm talking about. So here is, and I'll put me, where's a good spot? Over here? Okay. Now I'm probably still going to interfere a little bit with the book. Let's go side by side and see what happens. It's not as good. Let's go here, I guess. No, I don't like that one either. I guess that's our best bet. Oh yeah, I can strike myself a little bit. I just don't want to cover some of the stuff that may be there. Let's move me up a little bit. Woo! Give me right in the middle here. Is that better? Okay. So there I will stay. I mean, I can do the double page thing, but I'm just going to go through it page by page. As you can see on the cover, though, I'm not a big fan of the cover design. I think what they should have done, what I would have done, was I get the little strip there, and they do this on all the decades. It's not just the 80s book. And they have like a little strip of things from the 80s, and specifically comic books. I have a few nitpicks about it. One thing I think they should have explored more. I don't think they should have had this much dead space over here. I think that strip of stuff should have been bigger or just encompass the whole cover. I know they kind of want to go for like a uniform look to it, and I don't know. I guess maybe I kind of know what they're kind of going for. It kind of has almost like a Watchmen feel to it, which I don't think that was originally what they were intending. This kind of reminds me of. But that aside, one thing I have an issue with this little image that they got here, and I haven't looked at the other images as closely, but that backpack looks awfully modern. If you look at the fabric on that backpack, I know I'm getting really nitpicky, but that fabric looks very modern. I think it would have been better, because they do sell JanSports, like literal one-to-one creations of the old JanSports. I think a JanSport there would have been a lot. And maybe they can't put JanSport in the thing because of, licensings, but they could have put the JanSport up there, at least just covered the name, but you would have known by the material. I had a blue JanSport, like a navy blue one. I also had a black one when I was in high school in the 80s. And anyways, and I even had in junior high too. I had the blue one in junior high. That was my sister's. I think it was my sister's high school backpack. When she went away to U of M, she left it, and I just, inherited the blue JanSport, and then I ended up getting it ended up finally falling apart, and I got a black one. But it lasted for a while. I don't know what happened to the black one. The other thing is, look at those headphones. Those headphones are like late 90s headphones, if not early 2000s headphones. Those do not look like headphones from the 80s. I would have used actual headphones from the 80s. Most of the, like with the orange, like the Sony ones, again, I know they can't do the what do you call it? They can't do the, put Sony on there, but they could have easily just got some generic ones with the orange or yellow, the smaller, like, little, really uncomfortable earphone pads. They could have did that. I think that would have been cooler with like more of a JanSport bag. You putting the asteroids, and the what do you call it? The controllers up there. They used the weird controllers from Atari. They didn't use the stereotypical ones. I know when everybody thinks 80s, they instantly think Atari, but you know what? Nintendo Entertainment System came out over here in 86. So did Sega Master System. So Sega and Nintendo were around for pretty much most of the 80s too. They could have easily put a Nintendo controller. I think that would have been a little bit better. Or a ColecoVision, maybe right smack dab in the middle. I don't know if the Asteroids is fine, Missile Command, but really Asteroids and Missile Command are like 1980. And I know it's supposed to be all in the 80s, but putting the Cobra, the little file cards on there, that's cool. I think that was a nice little touch, although I don't know who this person is. Who would be going to school with Fish Police, Zot, American Flag, Ninja Turtles #3, and Ninja Turtles, Raphael Solo, or the Solo Raphael comic, which was an oversized comic, by the way, and then X Mutants #1 with the Eternity cover, and some file cards from their G.I. Joe. Who is this person? That's all I want to know is who is this person, because this person doesn't exist. Unless it's Keith Dallas. Keith Dallas, if you existed then, you were carrying all this stuff in your backpack. You're a lot cooler than you think you are. Sorry, you would be a lot cooler. Sorry, you're just as cool as you think you are. I'm not saying that was cool. Like I said, this backpack in the 80s would get your ass kicked if this backpack was opened. Maybe not the Astro. Who would bring their controllers to school? I'm not saying they're going to school. Maybe they're just going to their buddy's house, and in that case, you're okay. Load up. I used to do weird things to take stuff to people's house. I would take like a comic book box, like a short box. It would be like 25% the comics I want to bring with me, 25% art supplies, 25% like maybe some Warhammer miniatures or some Ralpartha miniatures and paints. If I'm going to go spend the night at my buddy's house, like my Ruther friend, right? That's what I would take to his house. I'd take the comic book short box, some comics, some miniatures we're going to paint, some paints. Because he always used to give me a hard time about not screwing the caps back on his paints. Or maybe it was the caps on his barrel markers. He used to get pissed off at me that I dried out all of his markers. I'm not saying that didn't happen. I'm just saying I don't know. Seems, maybe, I guess. I could see it. Sorry if that was the case. I think I've apologized before about this. And of course, art supplies, what are we going to do? We're going to, and like I said, if I was going to my Ruther friends and bringing this backpack full of stuff, for one thing, I wouldn't need to bring anything because he already has this Nintendo Super System, and he has Contra, and he has 2 controllers. So why would I bring my Contra NES and my controllers to his house? He's already got it. He knows the up, down, left, right, up, down, left, right, A, B, start. Gives you the 30 extra guys. So yeah, and I don't think I'd need a headset because I don't need to be in the car and tune out my parents. It was one of the things I see, my son does now. He puts his headphones on when he's in the car for longer periods of time. He puts his headphones on, walks to and from the bus stop. He's listening to music, and I listen to music too. I just didn't have them on as much. And when I was in the car, I was usually just talking. I was a social person, I'd talk. Even if I was talking to my parents or friends' parents or whatever, I would talk. And when I got to his house, I didn't need to listen to my own music. We were going to listen to all the music together. But anyways, here's the other thing. This is the other thing I find kind of weird is they put the X-Mutants cover on there. That is a pretty obscure reference to the 80s. Now, I made a whole video about it. Go back and watch my whole video on X-Mutants. Apparently nobody's seen it because nobody cares. Because nobody cares about the X-Mutants. So it's just odd that they would feature that cover on this. I mean, sure, you're going to put the Ninja Turtles. That's a given, right? Zot? Fishbullies? Maybe they couldn't put... Well, they got Marvel Comics in here, so I don't understand. Where are the Marvel Comics? This is the 80s. Where's the Wolverine Limited Series #1? Where's Dark Knight Return? Where's Watchmen? Really? American Flag, Zot, and Fishbullies. And the X-Mutants. No Elementals. I don't know. I find that I know I haven't even got into the book yet, or the preview yet. I'm already commenting about the cover. I love this book, by the way. Trust me. The cover just gives me... I have issues with the cover. So let's move past the cover. Where are we going here? Okay. There we go. There's Wolverine #1. Or at least, actually, that's not #1. That's number 2. I had a t-shirt of that, by the way. I had a red t-shirt of that I would wear in 10th grade. And I remember getting a lot of shit about it. People like, what? I remember I was standing at my locker, and Jason Rizzo, the dickhead from 5th grade that... No, it wasn't Jason Rizzo. It was... Who was it? It wasn't Rizzo. Oh, it was, Andy... What the heck was his last name? Short little dickhead. He's a dickhead. They're all short little dickheads. Rich kid. Dad's a lawyer. He tried to... Apparently he went to law school, as my one friend said, and he failed the bar exam like 6 times. Anyway, what the hell was his name? Andy... can't remember what his last name was. It's totally on the tip of my... I mean, they have a law firm in town. His dad's law firm. This is the type of people I had to go to school with. Lawyers, all these rich people. And I was a trailer park kid, so you can tell I have a certain disposition when it comes to, as you can tell from my videos, that I find to be a no-brainer. Some people think, what they think about me, but I had a lifetime of things that, like I said, formed my current disposition, mental disposition. Anyways, where are we at here? So yeah, you can see the chapters are broken down by years. Different people do. He had some people help him write some of the different chapters. He goes, I won't go into the introduction that much, but he talks about how he needed some help getting his facts straight. So he had some help writing it, which I think is pretty cool. But times are a-changing. It's funny. When I was living the 80s, I knew some of this stuff towards the end of the 80s. Obviously, I started collecting comics pretty heavily and started to learn about this type of stuff in 84, 85. And I didn't really get into it where I started reading like comics interviews. Not everyone, but I'd get comics interviews, Comic Scene magazine, going to conventions, talking to people at the comic book store, because there were comic book stores. All of that stuff was more like, for me, was a late 80s thing. So it was hard to know all of these things that were happening in the 80s when I was living it. But it all kind of makes sense when you think about it, because as they talk about, like, the times were a-changing. I mean, they were. I mean, the 80s was a big change from the 70s. A lot of things changed. Just people's attitudes, just in general, changed. But as far as comic books, this is when... The 80s is when we saw the rise... I mean, it started in the late 70s, but it really was the 80s that was the rise of the direct market. Now, you can say what you want about the direct market. What the direct market is that they're now selling direct to comic book shops, or people who were customers of the direct market distributors. Obviously, the direct market became pretty exclusively Diamond Comics in the late 90s. I don't know who it was. They're probably saying here, I don't know exactly who the direct market distributors were. I think there's more than one. I think that's the Diamond formed a monopoly, and I think that's what led to the crash in the 90s. I think before that, I think there was multiple distributors out with the direct market. So, see the spinner rack there they got? Away with the spinner rack we go. Even though there were spinner racks, obviously I talk about it all the way up until 89. There were spinner racks. I mean, Walden Books had a spinner rack. Fireside Bookstore had a spinner rack. Rochester Book Center would have had one, but instead they had this kind of shelf unit that they had built. I think they built it themselves, so they kind of just used that. Otherwise, they would have done a spinner rack. They were talking about 7-Elevens having spinner racks. I didn't go to a lot of 7-Elevens. Oddly enough, 7-Elevens weren't on every corner in the 80s. I could only think of like one or two 7-Elevens, and they were far out. Like, I couldn't ride my bike there. For me, it was Quick Pick, downtown Rochester, Perry Drugs. I don't remember Perry having a spinner rack, tell you the truth. And I know Quick Pick had another thing. They had porn magazines, or nudie magazines, regular magazines, and comic books on the bottom. There were a few spinner racks around. Most of them, like I said, B. Dalton had one. Walden Books had one, and like I said, Fireside. But the spinner racks were still there. However, this is also the time when the direct market did open up. And I don't know when Dave's Comics opened. I know the first one. I don't know if the first one was in Royal Oak or the first one was in Ann Arbor, but I didn't learn about Dave's Comics until literally like 1985. My sister had already been, I think she was on her sophomore year at U of M, and when I went up to see her, I went to it was called Village Corners, VC's, which is a little drugstore. And I went there because it was at the end of her block there by her sorority house. And I went there, and like I said, I probably told the story before, and they had a bunch of comics. And then they had a bunch of comics because they were also not sending them back. They were keeping them. And so they had boxes underneath like this. They had like it was essentially a wire rack like that, but it was like flat. And it was like near the cash register. And it kind of like had its own little alcove. I think they had magazines over there too. It was right there on the college campus. So right by all the fraternity and sorority houses. So it was a big place for people to go get comics. But I remember her telling me, hey, there's a comic booking shop in town called Dave's Comics. And I was like, oh. It was like upstairs in a building somewhere. It was in the main part of town, not on campus. At least I think so. I know Volta Midnight's there now, but back then it was Dave's Comics. And of course, not that far after that, when I went to started going to Royal Oak because of the Royal Oak, the Extravacon, people are talking about Dave's Comics. I go, oh, in Ann Arbor? And they're like, no, in Royal Oak. Oh, there is one? And then we learned about that, like 85, 86. So, and then that was the first comic book shop that I can remember that was a literal comic book shop. Troy Stamp and Coin, which is, I probably talked about this before, but they were more of like a collectible place, but they had a huge comic section. The whole back of the store was pretty much all comics, and that's where I got my Wolverine #1 limited series. Actually, I got all 4 of them there. I told that story as well. So the direct market's starting, right? Comic book shops are starting to pop up here and there. It's not just the spinner racks. They would say, oh, spinner racks at the supermarket. Kroger didn't have one. Chatham didn't have one. Foodland didn't have one. Not that Rochester's the bastion of all things, but Rochester was a pretty well-to-do North Detroit town, maybe like my one friend who moved into Rochester came from Warren. He'd have to chime in and tell me if Warren, I know there was more 7-Elevens down there. I don't know where he got his comics when he was younger. I think he probably told me, I just forgot. In Rochester, there weren't a lot. These spinner racks were just primarily at the bookstore. Like I said, a lot of the drugstores, Perry didn't have one. I don't think I think the only drugstore that had comic books was the Quick Pick downtown Rochester. And that was I think that was the only one. I got the RoboCop graphic Marvel Super Special there. Anyways, so they start off by talking about the direct market, and they really kind of hammer home the direct market. Now, the other thing that's kind of funny is, this picture, and you see the picture there of Love and Rockets and American Flag, is the direct market is why it was like the boom of independent comics. I mean, there was like a lot of counterculture independence, like back in like R. Crumb days and like the hippie generation, like the late 60s, with the comics underground. There also became a very comics underground kind of thing, but it wasn't really underground. It was selling straight to the direct market. So you would go to Dave's, which is kind of like a cool hip, back in the 80s, it was where all the hip kids, would go. All the hipsters would go to Royal Oak. Basically, my story with Royal Oak and like Ferndale, where Comics Cafe was, that Royal Oak is where all the gay people moved in and gentrified the shit out of it, made everything overpriced and hip. And then when they were done doing that to Royal Oak, they decided to go out to fashionable Ferndale, and they did the same thing to Ferndale. But at that specific time, Royal Oak was still in their battleground, and Ferndale didn't really become their battleground, I think, till the 90s. So I'm not joking about that. That's really what happened, but I might say that anecdotally, or jokingly, sorry. But yeah, if you were hip, you were alternative, which was at the time, mid to late 80s is when there was always before it was the new wave kids, and then they became like the alternative kids, and I guess punky kids or whatever, skinheads, the burnouts decided to cut their hair and stop listening to Iron Maiden, start listening to Black Flag, and shave their heads, whatever, put on combat boots. People started to go out to Royal Oak because that was the cool place, and go to Dave's Comics. So you would start going down there, you'd start seeing Love and Rockets pop up, American Flag pop up, a bunch of the other, like, not really counterculture, more punk. I guess if you were to consider the late 60s to be like Arcrum, I can't remember the other comics were, Zap. I know there was the Freak Brothers, that was Arcrum. That was like the counterculture, the hippie time period, and I guess so in the 80s it would have been like the pseudo-punk, but more new wave / punk, beginning of alternative counterculture comics, and again, all because of the direct market stuff. Let's see, what's he going to? Introduction by chronologically. Well, one thing I wanted to mention, they did say something I thought was kind of funny here. Let me just read this first paragraph to you real quick. It says, ask comic book aficionados about the 80s, and many will immediately reference such seminal publications as Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons' Watchmen, Frank Miller's Dark Knight, Art Spiegelman's Mouse. I'll get back on that one. Others will mention such crowd-pleasing series as Marvel Comics' Uncanny X. Here we go. This is proof that this book is proof that I know what I'm talking about. What are the two big Marvel comic books in the 80s? Uncanny X-Men, Amazing Spider-Mans, and they say Secret Wars. Secret Wars was the best-selling crossover book of the 80s, or limited series of the 80s, but X-Men, Amazing Spider-Man. What did they not mention? The Avengers. Like I said, despite what people think now with the MCU and the Avengers Endgame and all the emphasis on the Avengers, there's a reason why they went full bore on the Avengers and they didn't use their most popular comics because they already sold the rights to those to Sony in the 90s when they went through bankruptcy. So they had nothing left. They went, shit, we have nothing left. We sold all the cinematic rights to our best-selling characters. What are we going to do? Well, let's dig up the Avengers and make people like them. Because people did not like the Avengers, trust me. And if you said you liked the Avengers in the 80s, you were weird. Because, I only sort of tangentially liked them just because She-Hulk was in it after she left the Fantastic Four. And I was weird. So, yeah, it was all X-Men, all Spider-Man. That was, and for the extent, Daredevil. But Daredevil kind of lost favor once, Miller stopped doing the book. Once Miller stopped on Daredevil, and then Miller started focusing on his stuff like Ronin and Dark Knight, and then when the Ninja Turtles came out, which was making fun of Ronin and the Dark Knight and the Daredevil, people stopped Daredevil kind of fell out of favor towards the end there. I've never been a big Daredevil fan, and I keep saying this. It's especially when Miller writes it, it just gets too Catholic, and I get sick of hearing about all the Catholic shit in it. I'm not Catholic, I don't have anything against Catholic people, but I'm just saying, I'm just sick of hearing all the Catholic shit. It's like, I get it already, he's Catholic. You have to... Yes, Catholic people are Catholic, but it just got on my nerves. Anyways, I digress. Yeah, so right there, proof in the pudding. It says even others will point to the decade's plethora of new creator-owned titles like Kevin and Eastman and Peter Laird's Teenage Ninja Turtles, Mike Barron and Steve Rude's Nexus. I'll put a pin in that one. Howard Chaykin's American Flag. It was big. And then, of course, Hernandez's Love and Rockets, which was pretty big amongst a certain crowd. And again, this person obviously is of a certain crowd because the things he's mentioning are, with the exception of, yes, I mean, Miller's Dark Knight, Alan Moore's Watchmen, sure, Amazing Spider-Man, The X-Men, yes. Ninja Turtles, yes. Mouse, you had to be a certain kind of person to like that. I didn't learn about it till like whenever I got that videotape, The Masters of Comic Book Art, which was like I got it in like 87, 88. I think 88's when I got it. It came out in 87. Right about the time I got that book, How to Draw and Sell, Market Comp, or, the book I had over there, which, this one. You can watch my video, and I got a video on this book, too. Got this book right around the same time. So it's How to Draw and Sell Comic Strips for Newspapers and Comic Books. Watch my video on this book. I go into detail on it pretty extensively. I don't think I did did I do a video on the videotape? I don't think I did. The other one they forgot to mention here was Cerebus. I would say, personally, in my opinion, I think over Nexus, I think Cerebus, as far as a creator-owned comic, I think was a lot more popular than the Nexus. I knew about Nexus, and I would catch bits of it here and there. I think I had a graphic novel collection of like his single strips and single one-page strips and stuff. And I remember seeing a Nexus poster at one of the comic book shops. But I would say that Cerebus, Dave Sim Cerebus, is a lot more mentioning. Now here's the thing. They mention Cerebus pretty vaguely in this. I've got a theory that, and I don't want to get political, but I think that the people who wrote this book are of a certain political mind which doesn't agree with Dave Sim's politics, nor does it agree with Dave Sim's. There was some controversy with Dave Sim. And the reason I say that is I have a friend from high school right at this time who's the person who really got me into Cerebus, and he was Cerebus. I mean, he actually got Dave Sim to come to a public access taping of their comic book review show they were making back in the late 80s, and Sim was with it. So, he picked up Sim from the airport, brought him to the studio, and then dropped him off at his hotel. He was a pretty heavy Cerebus person until his politics started to not align with my friend's politics, and then suddenly he became the Satan. He was the worst person in the world. I got a feeling that kind of is going on with the people that put this stuff together. Just my opinion, but I'm saying that's what it feels like because I've seen it before. So, anyways, this is also not only, like I said, times are changing. Not only because of the direct market did you start seeing all these indies. I just call them indies. Whenever the indies, some people call them the black and whites. I always call them the indies because a lot of the indies were black and white to save on printing costs. But a lot of the indies, and then of course Marvel and DC, they started to give out royalties with the direct market. And this is where it became a thing to be a comic book artist. And this is where, when I learned about this and people were telling me, hey, you need to get on this, and you have to, take your talent and and try to get a job with Marvel or DC because they pay royalties. Now, I don't know what the royalties were at the time. I remember like 4 cents or 5 cents or something like that. 3 cents on every comic sold, So if they're selling, 100,000 copies, what is that, 30 grand? They pay you to draw the comic, right? Or write it or whatever you're doing. In my case, I wanted to draw the comic, or to some extent wanted to ink it, because I realized I didn't know if I could keep up with the deadline and I don't think I was good enough at the time to actually pencil comics, but I wanted to get into inking, and of course I talked about that with my video where I tried to, become an underling of Jeff Albrecht, and that didn't happen, but let's go to my calculator here. So let's say you're doing a comic at $100,000, and you get 30 cents. You get 3 cents a comic. Oops, not 30 cents. All right, it's $3,000. But you're probably only going to be getting paid $3,000 to pencil the thing, right? So instead of a one and done, they give you $3 grand, and then you go on to the next comic. you get another $3,000, pretty much double your money in royalties. So, you got to think, and you're doing more. If you're on a book for any length of time, let's say you do an entire year, you do 12 issues, right? Well, not only in 1 year did you make what? Sorry, I need the calculator. That's why I draw and don't do math. So you've got paid $3,000 to pencil a book, which seems a little high back then, but let's just say you did. Times 12, right? Right now you're making $36,000 just from doing the penciling. Let's add another $36,000 on top of that in royalties. Let's say you sold around 100. You're on a book that sells 100,000 copies. You can see where people in the 80s, some of these comic artists started to make some serious money, and it became a serious thing. My numbers are probably way over exaggerated, but even if they're like, close, that's still a lot of money. I mean, there's a reason why, like Ninja Turtles, I think the number one was only a 4,000 print run, and then when it was such a high demand, they had to reprint it so many times. And they're creator-owned, so they're getting all of their profits straight from that comic. I mean, you got to think that that's a reason why they got a shit ton of money quick, selling all those comics. So comics were a thing, in the 80s. And they talk about how it was on the verge of totally collapsing in the very early 80s. One of the key people, of course, they talk about in this book, who, brought it out of, brought it back into the, saved it, was Jim Shooter. He refused to bow into this whole thing. And he even talks about it in some quotes in there, and I've heard him mention this in interviews too before. He's like, I don't know why everybody was saying that the comic book industry was going to collapse. He says it was not doing as great as it used to be, but they said that they still made money. And they said Marvel was doing fine. It wasn't, like I said, he wasn't painting the world red or whatever he said. It wasn't, taking the world by storm. But he says they were making a comfortable living doing what they like to do. And they said they had cushy offices. So, if you could live in New York City and Manhattan there and work for Marvel every day and live down there, you had to be doing pretty good. So it's just like today. People are like, oh, the comic book industry's, dying. It's such hyperbole. It's such people just looking for attention, because I don't think it's going to collapse like everybody. It's sure, just like then. Times are changing. Obviously, Star stuff, I do work 100% digitally. A lot of things are going 100% digital now. They're getting away from, the floppies, as people call them. The overpriced pamphlets, which are comic books. And things even changed, in the turn of the century, around year 2000, when everybody started getting the trades, and that became a big thing. So times are always changing, but I think that the comic book art form, in and of itself, I don't think is going to collapse. Is Marvel going to fall apart? Well, I don't know. They're owned by Disney. They probably won't. There's lots of things that I think people are. I don't know why people want to see it fail, but it seems like people, this goes for everything, all the, the usual suspects you see online, it seems like they want it to fail. Why? Don't you like it? Because if you want it to fail, you probably don't like it. And sure, you might not like the way people are doing it currently, and there might not be anything you want to read, you might not be that enthusiastic about what's going on now, but you'd rather it completely fail, so therefore, if things turn, meaning maybe the stories are going to start getting good, maybe things are going to be, it's just like the Hollywood, it seems like people want Hollywood to fail. I think there's a lot of people that just have like a chip on their shoulder about rich people, like myself, that just want to see them burn because they're jealous. I think it's the same thing with comics. I think as people, they envy these people who are doing shit that they don't like, and they don't like the people that are doing it. A lot of it is politically driven. A lot of it is, the whole social thing. And for all the reasons except for what the comic books actually are, people have all these issues. And I think people want to see it. I just want to see it fail because I don't like those people. Well, if it fails completely and it's gone, right, then it could never come back. And like I said, I don't think comic books are in their current state of affairs are good. Like, times are a-changing. I bet you every chapter of these books for every decade, they say the same thing. Comics changed again. In the 90s, comics changed. Images around. The what do you call it? The comic book, the spectator bubble bursting. 2000s, the rise of the writer. The rise of the trade paperbacks. Times are a-changing. The 2010s, that's when, like, the whole, woke comic books or whatever started to come about, and that's when that whole movement. Times were a-changing. We're in 2000. We're almost halfway through the 2020s already. Times are a-changing. but to want it to fail just sounds to be you're fucking retarded is what it comes down to. If you want comic books to fail and you generally like comic books, you're retarded. That's what it. I don't want. Sorry, not to be PC, but you're fucking lunatic. Because you don't really like comics. You just want to. You're just an asshole and want to stir up shit. Is what you want to do, and somehow profit off of it. Sorry, I'll come down off my high horse on that one. Anyways, let's see. Direct market. Yeah, they go into more detail. And so if they start with chapter 1, the 80s. And they kick it off with the direct market. Now, like I said, I'm not going to read all this for you. And again, these aren't the full chapters. There's only a preview. So there's more to it than just what I'm showing you. But one thing I just wanted to show you that I do think is cool, of course, obviously, they also kick it off with the Dark Phoenix. And then they're talking about the newsstand in the wasteland. Where the newsstand, see, you got to think, Marvel Comics, DC Comics created in New York, right? New York, just like any big city, Chicago, LA, whatever, there's a lot of newsstands. And New York, is always known for its newsstands. Where there's so many people on the street, they'd come and they'd buy their magazines, newspapers, comic books, whatever, either on the way to or coming home from work or on lunch, whatever. It's a thing, right? I don't know how much of that exists today, just in general, because of the internet. I would say it probably doesn't. But even back then, pre-internet, I think the comic books were kind of not, like I said, they talk about being a newsstand wasteland. They said all the comic book sales are starting to fall apart from that because the profit margins were so low for these newsstands. And that's why you started to see them, more in the bookstores and stuff like that. And then, of course, then the direct market hit, the comic book shops started opening up. But here's what I think is cool. Now, I don't know why they don't give you the full one for 80. They give you the full one for every other decade. But as you can see, they give you this timeline. And I think these are cool. Because look at this. So this is 1980. You've got Star Trek the Motion Picture debuts on January 1st, right? Oh, sorry, that's the comic book version of it. No, wait. Yeah, wait. Marvel Comics, Star Trek comic book debuts on the news. Okay. It's the first 3 issues reprints of the Marvel Super Special. That's what I thought. It was the Marvel Super Special number 15, which had adapted the 1979's. Okay, so the movie, I think the movie came out in 79. So they reprint that. Okay, and then they come up to what's next on the thing. We got February 12th. Epic Illustrated, a Marvel Comics magazine modeled after the then popular Heavy Metal, featuring content aimed at a more mature audience, debuts on the newsstands. I remember that. I don't remember that year, but I remember Epic because I had some of them, towards the 80s as it went on. February 22nd, Miracle on Ice. I sort of remember. Been a big hockey fan, and even into the 80s. I liked it because my big thing was I liked the NFL, right? About, like I said, the 1984-1985 Chicago Bears, I was super excited with, right? But my dad was really into football and baseball, and I kind of wanted my own sport, and so I started to collect hockey cards. So this had already happened, and I remember hearing about it because people would talk about this, the Lake Placid, when America beat the Russians in the Olympics. And then I didn't really get full-blown back into hockey until in high school when a buddy of mine took me to a Red Wings game, and I was like, oh, I'm totally into it now. But for me, it started my love of hockey started with hockey cards because I wanted my own thing to collect than my dad's baseball and football cards. Anyways, so you got that happening. March 1st, Nick Dillon, Justice League of American penciler, dies at age 50. I know who Nick Dillon is, or Dick Dillon is, but I didn't know that he died back then. I didn't even know he was dead now, to tell you the truth. Let's see, Untold Legend of Batman. Yeah, see, for me, DC wasn't really even a thing. Even in '84, with Superpowers coming out, and loving what's his face, Jose Garcia Lopez's artwork, I still wasn't really in DC yet. Again, as I talked about it, with the DC direct currents, my DC stuff started to happen right around '88, when I started liking them. Roy Thomas leaves Marvel and goes to DC. They talk about some military operations. We have the Eagle Claw. So I'm not going to go over all these, but one of the other things I've noticed is Pac-Man debuts in Japan, 1980. So that tells you what's going on at the time. If you watch my video on arcades, there you go, Pac-Man. See it all. Like I said, people might think that my videos are all disjointed and I'm all over the place, but as you can see by this timeline, everything's all about. I think my one friend pointed out, he's like, yeah, your stuff's all about just 80s nostalgia, or late 70s to some extent, maybe a little bit of the early 90s, but it's all primarily nostalgia, pop culture nostalgia. So he's right. That's what it primarily is, and all of it intertwines, like music. As you can see, I don't have it here, but you'll see, like, they'll talk about Like a Virgin, MTV, watch my MTV video. They'll talk about all that stuff, all kind of is of that time period. 1981, that's when they start talking about royalties. They also talk about bringing Dazzler. They go through a whole thing on I won't go into the super detail on Dazzler, but they talk about the creation of Dazzler and then bringing her into the comics, and that they wanted to find a female audience. So they created a female character. Here's the thing. That's cool. Because, like I said, when they want, it's like, we want all these female readers to come to read comic books. Okay, so we're just going to make a bunch of male characters female. It's just like, that's not what they did back then. They created a whole new character. Even She-Hulk, sure, she's a derivative of the Incredible Hulk, but she's a separate character. Well, I guess to some extent, like Ironheart is a separate character from Tony Stark, right? So that kind of makes sense. I'm trying to think, who did that? And I guess Jane Foster was a separate character. So, and of course the X-23 girl becomes the female Wolverine. So I guess they are new characters. Spider-Gwen is a new character. They already had a Spider-Woman, but regardless. So the Dazzler, basically, they were trying to go off the disco thing. She was actually going to call it the Disco Queen, and she was black, called the Disco Queen. And they thought she looked too similar to Storm. So they kind of changed her. Plus Bo Derek. They wanted to look like Bo Derek from 10. So there's all that stuff going on. But they go into detail in that chapter in there. They talk about Dazzler. The thing about Dazzler with me, I remember, is my aunt Zola May, my mom's mom's sister. She was all about Dazzler, and she would come over to my grandma's house with her son, who also was a big Conan. He loved Conan. But she would come over and she would drop off a paper grocery bag filled with comic books. I don't know if she had a friend with a bookstore or what, or like a paperback exchange, because she was also big into romance novels. But she'd bring romance novels for my grandma, who could barely read. But anyways, she would come and she would bring in these comics, and like a lot of them were like Archie comics, because she was reading Archie comics at the time, but a lot of them were missing their covers. So a lot of these were the comics that were supposed to be destroyed. Somehow my aunt got a hold of them, and they weren't destroyed. And I would say for every 5 issues of Archie comics in this stack of this grocery bag filled with comic books, there was a Dazzler comic. And then there was a She-Hulk comic. And there was a Spider-Woman comic. My aunt Zola really liked the female characters, so it worked. And she was an adult, too. So it worked. They got, female readership by making these female characters, and that's what my aunt was reading. I don't think she was buying them. She was somehow getting them for free. But but she was reading them and then handing them off to me. So I had a lot of those like female books. And again, remember, I started to like the female characters a lot. A lot of it all came from my Aunt Zola bringing all of those. A lot of Dazzler comics, a lot of Spider-Woman comics. It's where I learned if Spider-Woman even was. She-Hulk, the She-Hulk series that started. They all kind of came out at the same time. I think we had some Miss Marvel in there as well. And then a lot of Archie comics. And I want to say that there was a couple other ones in there. I can't remember what they were. But, a lot of that came from that stuff. It's funny because then I remember seeing the covers, like this cover. It's like I never saw the cover, but I saw the interior. So, what do we have here? So, 81, we talk about Reagan, winning the election. They got the greatest American hero there. Superman 2. IBM, introduces its first personal computer with the Windows operating system, which nobody had in 81. I mean, I would say if you were rich, you probably had an Apple II or an Apple IIe before you did. I don't know that many people had IBMs at the time. The only people that I know who have computers, whether it was the library, whether it was the Shackamans down the street, the math professor at OU, it was all Apples for the most part. I know people started to get more like Amigas, and they started to get more IBM stuff towards the end of the 80s. But in the early 80s, I don't know anybody really had. I mean, I remember hearing the name IBM. Because it's funny because Mrs. Shackaman had the daughter was like a 1-year-old, and I just remember Mrs. Shackaman losing her mind because she crapped all over the living room floor, and we were in the bedroom playing with our He-Man guys, and she's like, oh my goodness, like what happened? What? She BM'd everywhere. What does that mean? I didn't know what that meant, right? Bowel movement. I didn't know what that meant. And then for some reason, when I heard IBM, the first thing that hit my head was IBM. Bowel movement. Yeah, sorry, I have 12-year-old humor, but I had 12-year-old humor when I was younger than 12. But anyways, I just thought that was the funniest thing. So every time I hear IBM, I just think of Mrs. Shackaman going, she BM'd all over the floor. So yeah, that was supposed to be Dazzler, or the Disco Queen. And they're like, she looks a little too much like Storm, so they changed her. Plus, I figured people would like to, as racist as that sound, they figure they don't want a black woman. They want a hot blonde bombshell who was popular at the time. It's just the way it was. I mean, you could not like that, and it does kind of suck, but it is what it is. That's what they thought, and they were kind of right. So, here we go. Also, yeah, 80. So we got cable in 83. I know it says here, the first video was Video Killed the Radio, started the Buggles. I could have sworn that I remember MTV starting and watching it for the first time, but I probably was watching them talking about it for starting, and then they just kind of replayed the playlist, because we didn't have MTV until we got cable actually, take it back. We had What's On in 81, but we didn't get actual Tribune United cable with MTV until 1983. So, go watch my MTV video. I talk all about my experience with MTV. But that was a thing that just started. So, of course, now comic books are going to, as you saw, you had the Disco Queen became Dazzler. You can see that the whole music influence is going to start coming together with the whole comic book thing. And then, of course, with movies, too, with the whole, movie rocking soundtracks and stuff. Sway Man's Amazing Friends. Sorry. I think this is when, what's-his-face came back. Jack Kirby came back into fold. Marvel fanfare started. They started talking about the direct market. Also gave rise to stuff like Kazar, Moon Knight, the Micronauts, that whole type of thing. And of course, this is 81, so what are we right a year away from? 82, obviously. But when G.I. Joe hit. And so we're talking about Wonder Woman. I think this was towards the... I can't remember. I think this was when Wonder Woman came back from being... I can't remember what... I didn't read this whole section of the Wonder Woman, but I'm thinking this is when she came back. Or I can't remember. Read it. I'll have to read it. You'll have to read it. Read it and figure out what's going on there. There you go. Boom. 1982. G.I. Joe. Blam. Figures drop. The comic book drops. I didn't realize that also in 82 is when Swamp Thing came out. I could have sworn Swamp Thing came out like a year prior to that, but I guess not. I guess Swamp Thing came out in 82. This is also when the Wolverine... Does it talk about the Wolverine? First issue Marvel's Wolverine Limited Series, yeah, in 82. I didn't get it till 84. I did get this, though, and go watch my video on this. I did get G.I. Joe #1 right off the spinner rack. There was a spinner rack at, the fuck was it? Sorry, what was the name of that, the drugstore on the end? Was it, I want to call it VC's, but that was the one from Ann Arbor. I was just called the Corner Drugstore at Meadowbrook Mall, at the corner of Meadowbrook. So if you walked out of the mall, there was Oceana Inn, and in the corner of the building there was a drugstore. It was just called the Corner Drugstore. There's spinner racks where I got the Rock and Roll comic, but right there was that's where I got G.I. Joe #1. And I remember them making a big stink. I gotta say, I got G.I. Joe #2 just because I was waiting for it. But then I remember people saying, "Oh, G.I. Joe #2 is worth more than G.I. Joe #1." Like, is it? Like, yeah, it's going for like $20-$30, which is nothing today, but there's a lot then. Well, wow, maybe I should sell my G.I. Joe #1. I held on to some of my G.I. Joe comics for a pretty long time. I don't think I got rid of my G.I. Joe comics until like the late 80s when I traded them to a buddy in the trailer park. But I had them for the longest time. Like I said, I had a short box. Kind of what I have now, a short box. I mean, I had more than that on the shelves, but as far as... I had a short box and it was filled with like all of my favorite comics and a lot of the stuff from when I first started collecting. And that short box, some stuff would leave, some stuff would come in, and I don't think I ever... I mean, I probably had at one time enough to fill a couple of long boxes, but I never... Sorry, take that back. I don't think at one time I had enough to fill a long box. I think that I would either trade them, I would get new ones, I'd sell them off, whatever. I don't think at one given time, even when I had all of the like a pretty long run of X-Men, long run of Amazing Spider-Man, I think it still was... I think I did buy a small box, and I should have just bought a long box, but I didn't have a trailer. I didn't have, just like here, I don't have a lot of room to put a bunch of long boxes. My buddy had a whole like closet thing in the side of his bed. He had a huge bedroom. He had a lot of space. I didn't have that kind of space. And then my other friend who lived in the trailer park, who I think got this comics, he had a whole bunch of long boxes because he was just going crazy trying to acquire comic books. And it took up like 25% of his room was just all comic long boxes. So he didn't have a lot of room in that bedroom. Yeah, so G.I. Joe #1. What are we doing on time? Oh shit, we're already at an hour. Jeez, I get talking and I can't get through one of these whole videos all the way. Yeah, the new mediums, they start the graphic novels at this time, which is a thing. They did the X-Men Teen Titans crossover. Michael Jackson's Thriller comes out. My buddy used to be big on Swamp Thing. As I kind of mentioned this in the DC Direct Currents, I didn't like the alternative comics, as I used to call them. I don't know, I tried because I wanted, my friend influenced me a lot on what he liked. Some stuff I just couldn't get into. Couldn't get into Animal Man. Couldn't get into Swamp Thing. Never got into, Sandman. I really didn't like that. It just bothered me. I don't know. It made me think of... A lot of those comics just put me in a head full of crazy. And then I had my other friend who, my Rush buddy, Cerebus buddy, he was influencing me on the stuff he liked. Also in the 80s, remember for me, 1988, that's when I discovered Tora Tuesday, and then the whole, anime thing started to happen, which of course wasn't called anime back then. It might have been, but nobody called it that. So what we got here, Ronin starts up, Return of the Jedi. As you can see, like I said, look at my videos that I've been doing. A lot of this stuff all coincides with this stuff. The Thriller video, 1983. What else do we got here? I think that's when Walt Simonson it's Beta Ray Bill. They talk about when Walt Simonson starts doing the Thor. Here we go, American flag again. So here we are. Let's just cover 1984 and I'll stop it. We can cover the rest of it later. I kind of talked a lot about the DC stuff with the direct currents, but even though this book goes through the entire 80s. So 1984, this is when I started collecting comic books. Like, seriously collecting comic books. And the Ninja Turtles, right there, obviously looks just like the cover of Ronin. That's what they're spoofing off the Miller stuff. You got the Secret Wars, right? Secret Wars started. Ninja Turtles start. Or Secret Wars area. Here we go. Here's the timeline. Spider-Man wears the black costume. That's why Spider-Man's my favorite. Black Spider-Man's my favorite costume. Spider-Man starts wearing the costume. That's also why they're doing those facsimile comics, and they're doing a whole year of Spider-Man, starting with issue 252, which I got. January of 1984, they start with Secret Wars. They start 2024. They start doing number one of the facsimile. So we're current right now. I would like them to. You know what would be really cool is if they. I don't think they're going to do it. Is if they did facsimiles of the Ninja Turtles. That'd be pretty sweet. And I know they have colorized versions. I've got my first comic versions of them, which I really like that. But I would like to see facsimiles of the originals. That'd be kind of cool. I know it'd be like the 9,000th printing of number one, but I know they reprinted Cerebus as a facsimile. Cerebus number one is a facsimile. I wonder why they didn't do the Ninja Turtles. I'm sure it has something to do with Paramount, something to do with Eastman and Laird. I don't know what it is. Yeah, so you got the Ninja Turtles there. Let's see. Sorry, I'm just caught this thing where it says here, February 28th, First Comics files a federal lawsuit against Marvel Comics and World Color Press, claiming the two separately engaged in an antitrust, anti-competitive activity since November 1982. I don't remember that. I haven't come across. Maybe I came across it passing, but I didn't really seriously get into it. Also, what else came out in '84? Ghostbusters. So as you can see, where we're going through, a lot of shit came out in 1984. 40 years ago to this year, a lot of cool stuff came out. And of course, they just had a Ghostbusters movie to hit the theaters with the original cast, minus Egon. Transformers started this year. Terminator came out this year. Like a Virgin came out this year. Well, Like a Virgin video premiered on MTV. I'm sure the movie came out, right? Prince's album Purple Rain becomes best-selling album in the nation and will continue for the next 6 months. So yeah, a lot of stuff happened. They do some more. Band-Aid happened. That was a George Michael, U2, Duran Duran, Sting, Phil Collins. You know that thing, the video for Band-Aid. So that happened. Obviously, there's Secret Wars number 8. It's in the black Spider-Man, black costume. There's issue 252 right there. And I'll go to 85. So we should stop it there. I'm just gonna flip through real quick, just to see what we can talk about later. You got Crisis on Infinite Earths, and this is when DC starts. Then they got Watchmen. You got the New Universe. You've got Batman: Dark Knight Returns. This is when Mouse, which I swear nobody cared about back there, or maybe hip people in New York did, but Midwest Michiganders, we didn't really pay attention to mouse very much unless you were hip and cool and lived in, Royal Oak. But I think this is when John Byrne started doing Man of Steel, blah, blah, blah. 87, year I met my buddy, literally, like just after the break, when I moved to Ruther, my Ruther buddies, when I met him. They didn't mention 86, they mentioned X Factor, which was a big comic I was reading then. Talk about the Lone Wolf and Cub, Jim Shooter gets fired, the Justice League International, Spider-Man, the marriage between Peter Parker and MJ. Next Generation starts. They start putting out Masterworks. Let's see what else we got. 88, Killing Joke, Death in the Family. The late 80s up until Keaton Batman. This is, I would say, it was Batman crazy. Batman, everybody had Batman fever. It was Batman. DC was really selling the shit out of Batman ever since Dark Knight Returns, the success of Dark Knight Returns, which is also what led to the interest to make the Keaton Batman in 89, which was only 3 years later. And it was Batman there's so many Batman titles coming out. I would say The Killing Joke, Death in the Family. I'm pretty sure that's also when The Cult made it. I think the Batman the Cult, the Bernie Wrightson, Batman the Cult by Bernie Wrightson, I think that came out in 88, I thought. McFarlane does issue 300 of Spider-Man. V for Vendetta. The Invasion, which McFarlane also did, which he did, but he had a lot of help on that one. Let's see. Yeah, I don't remember that show either. The Tick. And then everything went well, Inferno, my board just says it's 89, so Inferno, watch my video on Inferno. Keaton's Batman, Last Crusade. What else we got? The Punisher movie, Arkham Asylum, Gotham by Gaslight, which I think was Mike Mignola. Wasn't it Mignola who did that? I can't remember. Yeah, Mike Mignola, that's right. I thought it was. The Legends of the Dark Knight series starts with all those multiple covers, which basically was the start of the variants. She-Hulk, Excalibur came out. This is the premium stuff on, I always want to call it Hudson Paper. I think it was Hudson Paper that they did all those on. There was a different one. But you've got, She-Hulk, Sensational She-Hulk comes out. Excalibur comes out. Everything comes out. This is basically the last hurrah of the 80s. And 89 was a big year. It was a huge year. I was in 10th, 10th grade. I was in 10th grade. 88, 89, I was in 10th grade, yeah. So when this came out, I was just coming out of 10th grade when the Michael Keaton Batman hit. So, and then, of course, it was the 90s after that. I started in 89, I started my junior year of high school, and then, of course, the switch over to 1990 after New Year's. That's when, I want to say it was right around, it was either 89 or it was 90s when Comics Corner opened up, the place I talk about it, corner around the block from my mom's house. That opened up. That was the first big comic book shop that was in, it was in Rochester. So we had that open up. It's right about the time. No. When did my dad open his shop? Well, he started working for the guy downtown Rochester who already had a shop off the beaten path around Walnut. He started working for him, I want to say, in 90. And then he ended up partnering up with Finn, and they opened up the shop in that place I'm telling you, where the Main Street Plaza. That would have been 91 because I was second semester high school. This is when we were going to open up a comic shop, blah, 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 all that stuff. So that's all that time. That's all that time period. So most of the 80s for me, it was comic books, really. And then toys up to a certain point. I still never stopped buying action figures, even when I was in high school. Even though I tried not to. But the thing is, you had to be careful with what you're doing there. And but really, I think when I was just hog wild buying action figures, the thing probably stopped in 85, 86. Because by 87, I was pretty straight up comic books, and I was still getting toys here, and G.I. Joes here and there. Star Wars wasn't even a thing. They didn't have really any outside of Secret Wars and Superpowers, and of course I jumped back on Superpowers with my buddy that I met from Ruther, and we kind of did Superpowers there for a while, up until the 80s the 90s when the Toy Biz stuff came out. Or the Keaton Batman stuff in 89. So, yeah. So that's my stories that coincide with this book. Like I said, this is not the full book. This is just the preview. There's a lot more to it than what I'm just showing it to you here. I think it's this is only 50 pages. I think the whole book's 350 pages or something like that. It's a hardcover book. I will get it eventually. I just can't get it at the moment. Well, there's two things. A, I don't really have the cash right now because I was going to give him some money to my son for Easter for something he wanted. And it is the end of the month. And also, if I order it now, it'll probably come while I'm out of town. And I don't want it just sitting there on the outside my apartment because it'll either get ruined, wet, or stolen. So I'll probably wait until next weekend and order it and get it next week when I'm home, and then sit down and read it over the course of a few days and really digest it. Really, just kind of let some of this stuff sink in, because you know me, I like to put everything in and that's why I love the timelines. I like to put everything in a chronological order, and I like to relate them to other incidences or other things that are happening. That's why I tell you stories, even though I'm talking about whatever topic, and I'll go off on a tangent, is because something specifically happened that year or something in direct relation to what I'm talking about. So I know the tangents can get a little out of control sometime, and I'm trying to bring things back around. But that's one of the reasons. Like I said, that's why I'm not really doing these videos aren't really, there's plenty of people out there doing reviews on stuff. There's plenty of people out there talking about a lot of the stuff as well. But I'm trying to relate it specifically to stories that I have that I feel it's fun for people who either lived it too with me, or roughly the same age, or people maybe are younger, and you hear people talk about a certain time period, and it's just like somebody's older brother or a parent, spinning yarns about the way things used to be. And I try to correlate it with stuff that's going on today, because I don't want to just dwell in the past. I like to try to move forward and still, consume some of this content today. I know it's such a new way to say things, but that's why I'm still putting out content. That's how I make my living, is putting out content. So maybe not here on YouTube yet. I don't even know I don't think it's going to become a thing. Like I said, I've noticed, and here's a good time to plug it, like and subscribe, but we're going on 9 months now. This is enough time to have a baby. And I'm not even at 300 subscribers. So clearly nobody is watching this. And I get on average, unless I make a Ace Frehley or a Kiss video, or some weird shot in the pan like the Sears video or the Christmas catalog, I'm getting 25 to 50 people watching a video. That isn't nothing. So as I speak now, I'm pretty much talking to a very, 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 very small amount of people. From the way things are going and from what I've seen, and this is how I do things, I don't think I'm going to change them. Even if I had plenty of time to really research these videos and really get into the stuff and edit them and pour some money in it, money I don't have. Obviously I can't even buy a $45 book very easily. That I'm still not, I probably won't change much of what I'm talking about. So this is what you're going to get. And just, maybe I'll talk about something you're interested in, maybe I won't talk about something you're interested in. But this is what you're going to get. And so therefore, I think the end byproduct that is a very small audience to non-existent watching these videos, and I'm easily going to go a year, and I've been at like 295, now I'm down to like 292. Apparently some people said, fuck you, and they left. But I'm not going to, I'm only, I'd be lucky in a year if I broke 300 people from what's going on here. I've got almost 200 videos, too. It's crazy to think of 200, like, hour-long videos. It's 200 hours of content somebody could listen to. You don't have to look at me. If you don't want to look at me, don't look at me. You can put your headphones on or do other work and not even look at what I'm talking about. But whatever. It is what it is. So like I said, like and subscribe. You want to help it out. Comment. Yell at me all you want. Tell me that I'm doing everything wrong. And this is how you would do it. And most probably won't pay attention to you. I mean, I'll probably pay attention to you, but I probably won't heed your advice because I'm stubborn. And I like to do things my way. So even if it sink the ship in the process, so be it. Anyways, I will catch you later, and hopefully I will have this book sometime soon, and I'll do a little follow-up on this. And you know what I'm going to do? That's what I'm going to do. I stopped at 1984. When I get the book, because there'll be more stuff to talk about, then I'll do a follow-up, and I'll finish the book out. Hopefully I'll read more of it, too, and I'll tell you, and I'll finish it and do like a part 2 to this, okay, when I actually get the book. So for right now, this is my preview video of the preview of the book. So, and again, I might buy the 90s book, I might get buy the 70s book, I don't know yet. Probably by the 90s before I bought the 70s, most likely, because I lived it, some of it. Well, and I lived it. But anyways, I'll talk to you guys on the next one. Alright, I guess I don't know why, but I was going to end by showing you all of me. Alright, so anyways, take care, see you on the next one, bye-bye.